Hey guys! Today we will be talking about the housing crisis in the Silicon Valley and showing you how this affects the lives of actual people. We will also be going over possible interventions. Before we can dive in, we should talk about the broader issue, which is classism. Classism is an institutional, cultural, and individual set of practices that assign differential value to people according to their socioeconomic status. This form of oppression ensures inequality between classes. In the United States, there are 4 recognizable classes. There is the owning class, which has a lot of wealth and political power. Below that is the middle class, who could be described as white-collar workers. Then there is the working class, which are blue-collar workers. At the very bottom is the poor. The current system that we have in place is set up to benefit the upper classes at the expense of the poor and working class. This is continuing to get worse in the US, as the poor are getting poorer and the rich are getting richer. Now that we have defined the broader system of oppression, we can begin to look into specific examples of classism in the South Bay area. First, we'll start off with the history.
So where did the income disparity begin? It is important to look at the history of the Silicon Valley in terms of how millions of individuals ended up there. The history of the Silicon Valley begins with Spanish exploration, the first introduction of the first immigrants into the United States. At the time, California was made up of both Native Americans and the Spanish. In 1850, the gold rush became a large marker of the influx of new individuals, which increased diversity and the number of workers in the Bay Area. In the 1870s, the baby boom fed into the population, allowing it to reach 270,000 in the 1880s, and by the 1960s, it was 3.5 million and a place of advanced trade and a growing economy. Eventually, companies built themselves up mostly within the city of San Francisco, and those with larger successes began to take over the smaller businesses and startups. According to a 2018 article by Brittany Shute, quote, wages have dropped as much as 14% in the past 2 decades, and lower-income households have seen wages sag about 1%. Meanwhile, the tech sector's highest-paid workers have seen their wages increase as much as 38%, end quote. High-tech companies pay employees significantly more than what employees in other job categories work. Because of the high numbers of tech workers, the housing market reflects what tech workers can afford. Individuals working other jobs, therefore, are unable to find affordable housing in the same neighborhoods. Many problems occur as a result of the housing crisis. For example, in 2008, a housing crisis hit the Bay Area and was a large contributor to the Great Recession. Because the economy was originally doing well and tech companies were becoming more present, housing prices continued to rise and homeowners purchased houses with reliance on the increasing cost of housing, assuming they would be able to pay off their home years later when the house was worth much more. Additionally, due to the lack of limitations on handing out loans, for example to people with poor credit scores, many who did end up borrowing money could not pay it back to the banks. The economy began to crash as numerous people lost their homes, properties lost value, and as the Great Recession continued all the way through 2010. Just by touching on some of the history of the housing market, income and income gaps are shown to be reflected through housing crises.
Recently, companies like Apple and Google have been pledging money towards affordable housing in the Bay Area. Apple put over $1 billion towards subsidizing housing prices and funding for first-time buyers. But whether or not that addresses the problem depends on governing bodies to approve the construction of lower-income housing developments. In most cases, homeowners associations move to block most affordable housing developments, specifically in the city of San Francisco. Recently, the California legislature voted to reject SB 50, a bill that would deny restrictions on housing developments in job and transit-rich areas like Silicon Valley. This bill would make housing significantly denser while promoting public transportation and biking, directly addressing the problem of long-distance commuting the Bay Area has dealt with due to gentrification. The rate of immigration into the Silicon Valley has increased dramatically since 2010, when only 5% of new Californians had moved to the Bay Area. That number is now 20%, creating a housing deficit of over 3.5 million units in the region alone, according to Berkeley Economic Review. Commute times in the Silicon Valley have increased significantly more than any other growing metropolis in the U.S. This specifically affects those working lower-wage jobs in the area who have to live outside Silicon Valley because of the intense rent rates and housing costs. The cost of living has also led to an increase in construction costs due to the higher trade wages in the area, which means that funding doesn't go as far as one might expect. This vicious cycle will continue unless action is taken immediately to diminish the cost of living in Silicon Valley.
We interviewed 2 Bay Area residents in order to get their experiences and opinions on the current status of housing and income inequality in the Silicon Valley. First, we spoke with Gloria Hermosillo, who is an operations manager at Santa Clara University and has lived in the Bay Area for 48 years. Gloria spends almost an hour each way getting to her job from her 4-bedroom home in San Jose, which she shares with 7 and soon to be 8 other family members. Gloria works about 40 hours a week, but still says she worries about paying for housing often, with some months being harder than others. She describes her neighborhood as an area that is mixed with multi-million-dollar homes and run-down duplex units. What she notices is that while the multi-million-dollar homes have gardeners, maids, nannies, and tutors, the lower-income homes do not. These living in the lower-income homes cannot afford to pay for such services and end up having to do it themselves or go without these services. She believes that this takes away valuable time from low-income families that can better be utilized by spending quality time with the family and seeking new opportunities. She explains that for low-income families, it's like being in catch-up mode all the time and trying to make ends meet. Low-income families sometimes have to work 2 jobs in order to make the same or even less than high-income families. Children coming from high-income families have an advantage over children from low-income families because of the resources offered to them. Gloria especially sees this inequality in the children's sports leagues. The East Side leagues that her children belong to are run down and barely have any volunteers because parents have to work longer and have more responsibilities. Meanwhile, the South Side leagues have stay-at-home moms with infinite money to spend on their children. The South Side leagues, she believes, are better maintained and have better equipment and can afford to hire trainers and specialty coaches. We also spoke with Rodrigo Valle, a 23-year-old production engineer at Facebook, who has lived in the South Bay Area all his life. Rodrigo's commute to work consists of taking a company shuttle to work about an hour each way from his house in Campbell, where he lives with 3 other family members. He works about 45 hours a week, and he never worries about paying for housing. He tells us that he is happy with the compensation he receives for doing his job, although he does feel a bit guilty for making so much money for what he does. While we were speaking, Rodrigo told us, "I don't think there's anything super special about the work that I do, but my job is in such high demand in this area and these companies are willing to pay more for that. I don't like the sense of elitism there is in circles of computer science. The idea that computer scientists write code that other people can't read, I don't think it's out of anyone's grasp to learn the skills to do my job if they are given the resources to do so and have the economic means to pursue it." Rodrigo mainly witnesses income inequality at work with the contractors that Facebook hires to cook and clean in the office spaces. He also mentioned that while he was at UCLA earning his undergraduate degree, the campus climate was highly geared towards justice and wages for the contract workers that work in their dining halls. Taking into account the stark differences in opportunities and quality of life between those involved in the tech sector and those not involved, as shown in our interviews, we believe that something must be done to rectify how classism is playing out in the Bay Area today.
At a state level, California has set up a regional housing mandate, the Regional Housing Needs Mandate, where the State Department works with regional councils of government to estimate the number of affordable housing units needed for each region based on anticipated growth. However, this mandate does not take into consideration anticipated needs at each affordability level, since they only have to demonstrate that they are able to provide sufficient space for the amount of units needed. This is problematic because it causes an unequal distribution of affordable housing to people who need it the most and does not fully meet their needs. Case studies done on affordable housing in the Bay Area found that more affordable housing was built in jurisdictions with imbalances in job housing compared to regular market rate units. In San Francisco, there is also a coordinated community plan to help end homelessness, with youth in particular. Their process is to identify, assess, and problem solve for adolescents who are at risk of homelessness and provide them for better outcomes. When youth were asked about their barriers for housing, 43% said their age prevented them from receiving permanent housing. and 32% felt their age prevented them from getting employment. By providing children with permanent housing that is within access, will help provide them with long-term success and stability while giving them opportunities to be active in their community. These opportunities will allow them to step up and take leadership roles, which they can learn important skills that will allow them to find work and build careers. This intervention approach, focused on youth at risk for homelessness, helps with the root of homelessness and housing disparities in the Bay Area because it provides children more opportunities to receive education and employment, which will help prevent them from homelessness in the future.
So, to finish off, we hope that you guys have learned about how serious the housing crisis in the Silicon Valley actually is. Hopefully, we have effectively shown you guys how the housing crisis is part of the broader issue of classism and the unfair system that is put in place. You've seen how this has played out over a long period of time and is continuing to get worse. It is important to note that classism does not just affect housing, but also access to healthcare and quality education. Keeping this in mind, it is important that we do not place blame on individuals who are in adverse situations. Instead, we should challenge the system that put them in that position. We want this video to serve as a call to action. You can all take action by spreading awareness about class inequality and advocating for economic justice. Together, we can work to provide resources and support for those who are in adverse economic situations.